12 failed 1980s restaurant chains that didn't survive, and what we can learn from them. If you grew up in the 1980s, you remember what eating out felt like. The neon signs humming over strip mall parking lots, the wood-paneled dining rooms, the salad bars behind the sneeze guards, the smell of sizzling steak hitting you the second you pulled open the door. These weren't just restaurants. They were where life happened. Birthday dinners, Friday nights after a long week, the booth where your dad always sat. In this video, we're going back to 12 restaurants that once packed dining rooms from coast to coast, but have since vanished. Some faded quietly, others went out in ways you won't believe. Let's see how many you remember. 1. Beefsteak Charlie's. We're starting with a chain that made one of the boldest promises in restaurant history. All-you-can-eat shrimp. That's right, Red Lobster didn't come up with the idea. Bottomless beer and wine. Steak dinners for under $9. It was called Beefsteak Charlie's. And if you lived anywhere near the East Coast in the early 80s, you probably walked out of one feeling like you'd gotten away with something. The name goes all the way back to 1910. A Manhattan restaurateur named Charles Chissar, nicknamed by a newspaper guy. But the chain you remember had nothing to do with that guy. In 1975, a man named Larry Ellman was running a failing chain called Steak and Brew. When it went bankrupt, he rebranded every location as Beefsteak Charlie's, borrowing a dead man's name with no connection to the original. And somehow, it worked. By 1983, $9 got you a steak dinner, unlimited salad bar, a mountain of pre-peeled shrimp, and as much beer, wine, or sangria as you could drink. The whole place smelled like char-broiled steak and butter. For under $10, you felt like royalty. The chain got so popular that Saturday Night Live spoofed it in 1980. They called it Pre-Chew Charlie's. At its peak, 68 locations along the East Coast. But here's the thing about giving away unlimited everything. Somebody has to pay for it. Shrimp costs alone were eating the company alive. Some customers ate so much that managers asked them to leave. In 1985, they tried rebranding to Lifestyle Restaurants. Nobody cared. By 1987, Bombay Palace Restaurants bought what was left for $8.4 million. The company had burned through $20 million. Bombay Palace itself went bankrupt 2 years later. A brief revival attempt in 2009, one location inside a Long Island mall, closed almost immediately. Today, Beefsteak Charlie's is completely gone. The name lives on in old menus on eBay and a 2018 episode of The Goldbergs. That's it. Next time a restaurant promises unlimited everything at a price that makes no sense, remember this place. That kind of generosity usually means somebody's running out of runway. Speaking of restaurants where the concept was bigger than the budget, 2. Victoria Station. Imagine walking through a door that looks like an old train depot down a narrow hallway and sitting inside an actual railroad boxcar to eat a thick-cut prime rib. That wasn't a theme park, that was dinner. And it was called Victoria Station. 3 Harvard Business School graduates dreamed this up in the early 1970s. They didn't just decorate to look like trains. They built restaurants out of real converted railroad cars, real boxcars, real cabooses, dark wood, dim lighting, the tight, cozy feel of a genuine dining car. It wasn't just a meal, it was a destination. By the mid-1970s, Victoria Station had over 100 locations across the country, and even overseas. The menu was honest. Steaks, prime rib, barbecue ribs, at prices a regular family could swing. Kids loved eating inside a train. Adults loved feeling like they were somewhere special. Both were right. But real train cars cost real money to buy, transport, and maintain. Every new location was a major construction project. When beef prices spiked in the late 70s, the margins got razor thin. Competitors figured out you could serve the same steak dinner without maintaining a fleet of antique railroad cars. In May 1986, Victoria Station filed for Chapter 11. By the early 90s, it was gone. When a restaurant spends more on the stage than the kitchen, enjoy it while it lasts. Now, Victoria Station staked everything on atmosphere. The next chain staked everything on a single ingredient. Just as dangerous. 3. Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. In the 1970s, the fast food world belonged to burgers. And then Arthur Treacher's showed up with something nobody else had. Golden, crispy, British-style fish and chips. Served fast, served cheap, and served in a quantity that made you forget you were in a fast food joint. Named after a real British actor famous for playing butlers in old Hollywood movies, the chain exploded to over 800 locations by the mid-1970s. In a world owned by hamburgers, that's almost unbelievable. Atlantic cod, hand-dipped in batter, fried until it shattered when you bit into it. Thick-cut chips with just the right amount of salt. And the hush puppies, those sweet, crunchy fried dough balls. People still bring them up decades later with something close to reverence. But Arthur Treacher's built its entire identity around one ingredient: cod. When cod prices shot up and supplies got tight, they quietly swapped in cheaper fish. Customers tasted the difference immediately. At the same time, America's love affair with low-fat everything was making deep-fried food a harder sell. Ownership changed hands. In 1982, the chain was sold to Lumara Foods. 4 months later, Lumara filed for bankruptcy. Most locations closed during the 80s. Today, a handful still exists tucked inside other chains. But the standalone experience, 800 locations, and the best hush puppies in fast food, that's gone. When your favorite chain quietly changes the recipe in hopes you won't notice, that's usually not a one-time cost cut. That's the first domino. 4. Red Barn. Red Barn didn't die because the food got worse. It didn't die because people stopped showing up. Red Barn died because somebody decided the land underneath it was worth more than the restaurant on top of it. Founded in 1961 in Ohio, Red Barn had a brilliantly simple concept: fast food restaurants shaped like actual red barns. The design was so unique they patented it. You could spot one from the highway before you could read the sign. The menu had range: the Big Barney Burger, fried chicken, fish sandwiches, and one of the earliest self-serve salad bars in fast food. Picture it: long summer road trip. The kids are losing it in the back seat. You see that red roof above the trees? Burgers, fries, shakes. Problem solved. At its peak, Red Barn had several hundred locations across the US, Canada, and Australia. But the chain kept getting passed from owner to owner. Each time, the new owners cared less about the food and more about the real estate. Locations were shut down and sold off. In 1986, bankruptcy. By the end of the decade, gone. A few barn-shaped buildings still stand. Some are Five Guys locations, some are auto repair shops. Ghost barns on the American roadside. When your favorite spot gets bought by a company you've never heard of, pay attention. They might not be buying the restaurant. They might be buying the land. 5. Rax Roast Beef. If you ever want to understand what happens when a company completely loses its mind, meet Rax Roast Beef. Maybe you ate there every week. Maybe you worked the salad bar as your first job. Either way, you watched one of the strangest collapses in fast food history. By the mid-1980s, Rax had over 500 locations in 38 states. It was the only chain giving Arby's a real fight. The restaurants had wood interiors, glass-walled solarium dining rooms, and flowers on the tables. Flowers in a fast food restaurant. The food was honest. Thick roast beef sandwich, loaded baked potato, solid salad bar. But somebody at headquarters decided good wasn't enough. They wanted Rax to become the champagne of fast food. So they added pizza, then a pasta bar with Alfredo sauce, then tacos, then Chinese-style food, then garbanzo beans and meatball pockets. I did not make any of that up. They carpeted the floors, hung wallpaper, bragged in commercials about playing popular music, not elevator music. The slogans kept changing. Fast food with style. Nobody stacks up to Rax. Gotta get back to Rax. And then, you can eat here. That was the actual slogan. As if the selling point was that the building was technically classified for food service. Meanwhile, Wendy's was quietly borrowing every good idea Rax ever had and doing them better with none of the identity crisis. And then came Mr. Delicious. In 1991, Rax hired an ad agency that produced an animated middle-aged man who, in national TV commercials meant to sell roast beef sandwiches, talked about his therapist and his vasectomy. 3 months later, Rax filed for bankruptcy. Today, about 6 locations survive in southern Ohio. Back to basics. Just roast beef, fries, and shakes. No pasta. No animated men discussing surgery. When a restaurant keeps changing its menu, its slogan, and its personality every few months, it's not reinventing itself. It's panicking. We've covered 5 chains so far. Do you remember eating at any of them? Maybe it was your regular Friday night spot. Maybe it was your first job, pulling shifts behind the counter, bussing tables. Whatever the memory is, drop it in the comments. The next one might surprise you, especially if you grew up near Los Angeles. 6. Pioneer Chicken. If you grew up in LA in the 70s or 80s, you don't need me to explain Pioneer Chicken. It was as much a part of the city as palm trees and freeway exits. In 1961, Rick Kaufman opened a fried chicken spot in Echo Park on Sunset Boulevard. He learned to fry chicken while working at the Hollywood Ranch Market, where he was reportedly fired for giving away too much food. So he opened his own place. The chicken was unlike anything else in fast food. Bright orange batter, heavy seasoning. The technique was backwards from everyone else. Dry dredge first, then wet batter, then straight into the oil. Fried until the crunch carried across the room. And the orange whip? A fizzy, sweet orange drink. Everybody ordered it. You'd grab a two-piece combo with mashed potatoes, coleslaw, a biscuit, and that orange whip, and for a couple of bucks you were set. By the late 1980s, there were around 270 Pioneer Chicken locations, almost all in California. In Los Angeles, there were more Pioneer Chickens than KFCs. Think about that. Muhammad Ali did a TV commercial. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar showed up in ads. You can spot Pioneer in the background of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But Pioneer was a local fighter in a national ring. When KFC, Popeyes, and Church's came hard for California, with ad budgets Pioneer couldn't match, the walls closed in. In 1993, Popeye's parent company bought the chain and converted nearly every location. Nearly every one, but not all. 2 franchise owners, one in Boyle Heights, one in Bell Gardens, refused to convert. Those 2 East LA locations are still open today. Original booths, same recipe, same orange whip. They're not franchises anymore, they're time capsules. The chains with the deepest roots in their community are the hardest to kill. 7. Bonanza and Ponderosa. 2 names, same memory. Maybe you bust tables there in high school. Maybe you celebrated every birthday there until you were 12. 2 separate chains with the same DNA. Bonanza was born in the 1960s, named after the TV Western. Actor Dan Blocker, Hoss Cartwright himself, was involved in the early days. Ponderosa came along in 1965 out of Kokomo, Indiana, also named after the TV ranch. Over the years, both ended up under Metro Media Restaurant Group. Remember that name. It's coming up again. The setup was half cafeteria, half steakhouse. Order your steak at the counter, then hit the buffet. Salad, rolls, baked potatoes, soft serve ice cream, a full steak dinner for the family, under $10 a head. Sunday afternoon, the smell of grilled steak hits you before you're through the door. Your parents ordered the sirloin. You make 4 trips to the dessert bar. Nobody says a word. It wasn't just dinner, it was the birthday tradition. The after-church reward, comfort, and affordable. And that combination made it feel safe. But the all-you-can-eat model that felt so generous was also what made it fragile. Margins were paper thin. The late 80s recession hit working-class families hardest. The exact families filling those dining rooms. Metro Media was stacking up debt while juggling multiple chains at once. By the 2000s and 10s, most locations were gone. A handful still operate in small towns. But walk into one today and you can feel the difference. The buffets are smaller. The dining rooms are quieter. All you can eat sounds like a gift to the customer. But it's always a gamble. When beef prices climb, the house always loses. 8. Steak and ale. Before Outback. Before Texas Roadhouse. Before Longhorn. Before all of them, there was steak and ale. Every casual steakhouse you've ever eaten at exists because steak and ale did it first. In 1966, Norman Brinker opened the first one in Dallas. He'd later reshape the entire casual dining industry. The idea, English pub decor, dim lighting, a proper salad bar, affordable steaks, and warm honey wheat bread served with butter fresh from the oven. People still talk about that bread like it was a religious experience. Over 100 locations at its peak. For a whole generation, it was the first nice restaurant they could afford regularly. Nicer than a diner. Cheaper than a white tablecloth steakhouse. The kind of place where you'd take someone on a second date or treat your parents to dinner. Dark wood everywhere. A candle on the table. And then that honey wheat bread arrived. Warm, slightly sweet, with butter sinking into every slice. You hadn't even looked at the steak yet, and you already felt like you were somewhere that mattered. But Norman Brinker invented something so good that everybody copied it. Outback, Texas Roadhouse, Longhorn, Applebee's, all newer, flashier, spending more on advertising in a week than Steak and Ale spent in a year. Steak and Ale ended up under Metro Media, the same company juggling Bonanza, Ponderosa, and Bennigan's. Menus went stale. Decor got tired. Marketing nearly non-existent. In 2008, Metro Media went bankrupt. Every remaining location shut down. Being first doesn't keep you safe. If you stop improving, the people who copied you will eventually pass you by. 8 chains down. Which one hit you the hardest? Is there one I haven't mentioned that absolutely belongs on this list? Tell me in the comments. You might just inspire a part 2. And if you appreciate content that actually digs into these stories instead of just listing names, hit subscribe. I've got more coming. Now, the last 4 get heavier, stranger, and the final one ends in a way nobody saw coming. 9. Bennigan's. Of every chain on this list, Bennigan's might have the most shocking ending. One day, it was packed. A few days later, employees showed up for their shifts and found padlocks on the doors. If you ever worked there, tended bar, waited tables, ran food, you might have been one of them. Bennigan's opened in 1976. Irish pub theme, dark wood, brass fixtures, stained glass. The vibe was more bar than restaurant. Loaded potato skins, oversized cocktails, and the Monte Cristo sandwich. Deep fried, dusted with powdered sugar, served with raspberry jam. Imagine a ham and cheese sandwich that went to Mardi Gras and never came back. For a whole generation in their 20s and 30s during the 80s, Bennigan's was where the weekend kicked off. Not quite family dining, not quite a nightclub. Somewhere in between with a lot of potato skins. Friday night, 1985. You walk into Bennigan's and the bar is 3 deep. Somebody's waving down the bartender. The potato skins just hit the table. For the next few hours, nothing else exists. But behind the buzz, the foundation was cracking. Like Bonanza, Ponderosa, and Steak and Ale, Bennigan's ended up under Metro Media, drowning in debt while Chili's, Applebee's, and TGI Friday ran circles around them. On July 29, 2008, the axe fell. Chapter 7. Not reorganization, liquidation. Employees arrived at work and found chains on the door handles. No warning, no goodbye shift, just locked out. About 15 franchise-owned locations still operate. But for anyone who was there on a Friday night in the 80s, the real Bennigan's ended the morning those padlocks went on. A full dining room on Friday doesn't mean the company is healthy. The debt is always behind the curtain. 10. ShowBiz Pizza Place. If you had kids in the early 1980s, or if you were one, ShowBiz Pizza Place was the closest thing to a theme park you could reach in 20 minutes. Pizza, arcade games, a ball pit, and a full band of singing, dancing, animatronic animals on stage. Maybe you celebrated your 8th birthday there. Maybe you worked the prize counter as a teenager. The origin is a rivalry. Nolan Bushnell, the man behind Atari, opened Chuck E. Cheese's in 1977. Robert Brock, an early partner, thought Bushnell wasn't pushing the robot technology hard enough. He partnered with inventor Aaron Fechter, and in 1980 opened ShowBiz Pizza Place. Same idea, better robots. Fechter's creation was the Rock-a-Fire Explosion, a full animatronic band. Billy Bob the Bear on vocals, Fats Geronimo on keyboards, Mitzi Mozzarella singing harmonies. The lights, the noise, the music. You'd walk in and your eyes went wide. Kids screaming in the ball pit. Somewhere in the middle of all that beautiful chaos, somebody carrying out a birthday cake with candles. For a 7-year-old in 1983, it was the greatest place on earth. But ShowBiz was built on arcade games and animatronic technology, both about to become obsolete. The video game crash of 1983 gutted arcades. Kids who used to beg for quarters were getting Nintendo consoles for Christmas. Each animatronic installation cost around $100,000. In 1984, Chuck E. Cheese went bankrupt. ShowBiz bought its rival, then launched Concept Unification. Starting in 1990, every ShowBiz became a Chuck E. Cheese's. The Rock-a-Fire characters were ripped from stages, reskinned, given new faces. Billy Bob became Chuck E. By 1993, ShowBiz Pizza Place was gone. It didn't go bankrupt, it was erased. Aaron Fechter still has original Rock-a-Fire animatronics in his warehouse in Orlando. The robots outlived the chain. When a company buys a beloved brand and quietly replaces everything that made it special, that's not a merger, that's an erasure. 11. Sambo's. This one isn't simple. Sambo's served some of the best pancakes in America, and the name carries a weight no stack of pancakes can outweigh. Both things are true at the same time. Founded in 1957 in Santa Barbara by Sam Battistone Sr. and Newell Bo Bonnet. Sam and Bo. But the restaurant also leaned into imagery from the children's book, The Story of Little Black Sambo, which had long been tied to racist stereotypes. Paintings from the story decorated the walls. The branding used the connection on purpose. Whatever you think about the name, the food was real. A 24-hour pancake house. Over 1,100 locations at its peak. The pancakes were thick, buttery, and golden. The coffee was bottomless. The waitress knew your name. Late-night cravings, road trip breakfasts, lazy Sunday mornings. For a lot of families, Sambo's was a ritual. But by the late 1970s, the country was looking more carefully at names and images it had accepted without question. Civil rights groups protested throughout the 70s. Several cities pressured the company to change the name. Some locations were renamed the Jolly Tiger. At the same time, the finances were caving in. An aggressive expansion scheme called Fraction of the Action gave managers a cut of profits. Great when growing, devastating when growth stops. In 1981, Sambo's lost $50 million and filed for bankruptcy. By 1984, nearly every restaurant was gone. Only the original Santa Barbara location held on, still using the name. In 2020, 63 years after it opened, it was finally renamed Chad's. A brand name isn't just a word on a sign, it carries meaning. When that meaning shifts in the culture around you, pretending it hasn't will cost you everything. 12. Chi-Chi's. Chi-Chi's brought Mexican food to the suburbs. For millions of Americans who'd never tried a chimichanga or a real margarita, this was where it happened. Bright colors, festive music, servers singing happy birthday in a conga line. Margaritas the size of your head. Founded in 1975 in Minneapolis by restaurateur Marno McDermott and former Vikings quarterback Fran Tarkenton. By the 1980s, over 200 locations across North America. You'd walk in and the music hit you first. Then the smell, sizzling peppers, melted cheese, tortillas off the grill. Chips and salsa landed before you touched the menu. Sizzling fajita platters carried overhead, trailing steam through the dining room. And that chimichanga, golden, crispy, steaming inside, was the reason most people came back. For a lot of families, Chi-Chi's wasn't just dinner. It was the Friday night tradition, the birthday spot, the place where you first tried salsa that actually burned. By the early 2000s, competition had caught up. Taco Bell, On the Border, Chili's had all moved in. Debt was piling up. Chi-Chi's filed for Chapter 11. Struggling but still open. Still packed on weekends. And then the worst thing that could possibly happen. In November 2003, a Chi-Chi's in Monica, Pennsylvania became the center of the largest hepatitis A outbreak ever traced to a single American restaurant. Over 650 people infected. At least 3 died. More than 9,000 received emergency immune shots. The source? Contaminated green onions from a farm in Mexico. The FDA determined contamination happened during growing and packing, not in the kitchen. It didn't matter. Chi-Chi's was already weakened by bankruptcy. Victims sued directly. Every remaining U.S. location closed by 2004. Over 200 restaurants. Gone in months. In fairness, the disaster pushed real change. It forced tighter produce sourcing, better farm-to-table traceability, and stricter imported ingredient safety standards. The tragedy wasn't for nothing, but it came at an unforgivable cost. Today, Chi-Chi's survives as jarred salsa at the grocery store. Some European locations still operate, but the American restaurant, conga line birthdays and giant margaritas, is gone. Erased by something as small as a contaminated vegetable from a farm thousands of miles away. You can look up a restaurant's health inspection scores online in most cities and counties. Takes 2 minutes. That transparency exists in part because of what happened at Chi-Chi's. Use it. These 12 restaurants weren't just businesses, they were where you celebrated birthdays, survived road trips, went on first dates. They were part of the rhythm of life in the 1980s, and when they disappeared, a little piece of that rhythm went with them. A few of these names do still have locations out there. A handful of Rax spots in Ohio, some Bonanza and Ponderosa in smaller towns, a couple of Pioneer Chickens holding on in East LA. If you're lucky enough to live near one, maybe it's worth one more visit. If I missed a chain that belongs on this list, tell me in the comments. Your stories are what keep these places alive, long after the signs come down and the parking lots go empty. And if this trip down memory lane brought something back for you, share it with somebody who'll say, "Oh wow, I remember that place." Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.